as someone that's been in the Drop Kiwi Farms circles for a while and is now not, here's my fucking issue with the movement. So, I first joined the whole Drop Kiwi Farms thing because I was annoyed about one specific thing. And that was the volume of women who are the subject of sexual harassment. Even if they're stupid, even if they do something stupid, even if it's deep faked, even if it's real, whatever it is, the sheer amount of revenge porn and sort of derogatory sexual harassment, in my opinion, violated human rights. And I didn't care about people being mean. I don't give a fuck about criticism. But I don't think sexual harassment was ever part of freedom of speech. And that was my issue. But that being said, over the course of around a year, I've seen KF clamp down harder on that kind of stuff. I think the influence of people like Little Drip has been helpful in the sense that KF is now becoming more of a space where targeting women and harassing women and calling them thoughts and calling them slags is no longer something that's going to be considered based. And I think that that's really helpful, that there are people like Little Drip who make threads to call out men for their shitty, disgusting behaviour. But that being said, when I joined the Drop Kiwi Farms thingy, whatever the fuck that was, I joined for the reasons of wanting to mitigate sexual harassment and child abuse and all of the things that people talk about in that regard. That was why I joined. But after a few weeks, I realized that no one else had an actual reason for being part of the movement other than they had a thread. And that pissed me off because I was someone who had suffered, and I'm not saying it wasn't my fault, it probably was, but I'd suffered a lot of sexual harassment and people taking advantage of me in vulnerable positions when I was like, whatever, when I had mold poisoning and when I wasn't thinking straight. I had suffered so much of that I had like literal PTSD, which sounds cringe and it sounds, but I'm not saying I have PTSD from people criticizing me. I don't give a fuck about that. I have PTSD from people saying that, from people trying to get me to kill myself, from people deep faking pornographic content of me, from people distributing revenge porn, right? That shit is not just people criticizing you. That shit is you being violated. Your consent is being violated. And that was my problem. But when I joined the Drop Kiwi Farms movement, every single other fucking person had no actual fucking moral cause. There was no moral explanation for why they were doing what they were doing. They weren't flagging stuff because they believed in anything. They were flagging stuff because they had threads and they were mad. And that was something that pissed me off because I didn't give a fuck that I had a thread, apart from maybe at the start when I was really young. But I didn't really give a fuck for the most of the time that I had a thread, until I became the victim of people literally going out of their way to like to try and get me to kill myself, which I think goes way beyond the pale of just criticism. But that was my problem. And that was why I joined, because I was like, maybe other people also have a problem with this type of behaviour. And I'm not saying it's Josh's fault. I'm just saying that the culture, that there needs to be less of a tolerance for this kind of behaviour. And that translated in my mind at the time to being anti-Kiwi Farms. And after a good few months, I started to become more and more aware of the fact that no one else actually gave a shit. They just wanted their threads down. They didn't want just the like sexual harassment material offline, which I completely understand, because I don't think that is free speech. I think that is just flat out sexual harassment. But they didn't want that stuff taken down. No, they wanted their entire threads removed. And that is something that I had a problem with, because I was like, you know what? At what point are any of you lot going to admit that you just don't want people criticizing you? When is anyone going to admit that? Because I would sit with people. I'd sit in voice chats with people and I'd say, what is your reason for being here? Because we'd all have this, you know, who are you? What's your name? I'm this person. How did you come to this movement? Sort of thing, right? And I'd ask them. why they joined, and there would never be a distinctive answer. And when you would boil it down, all of the weird deflections and copes and essay postings, it would all boil down to they don't want to have a Fred. And that was something that I never actually said. I didn't care that I had a Fred. I cared that people were posting stuff that was sexual harassment material, like revenge porn and deepfakes pornography. That was what I cared about. I didn't give a shit about the criticism. People are allowed to hate me. People are allowed to make fun of me. I don't give a fuck. But my problem purely was that we shouldn't create environments that tolerate non-consensual pornography, because that's how things like sex trafficking happen. In fact, I'd go as far as to say I'm anti-pornography. But the thing is, everyone else who I bumped into in that movement, none of them had a distinctive thing that they were fighting against. All of them just basically wanted their friends taken down. And that was something that was my problem with it. Because it got to a point where it was like, where now? I'm at a point in time where I'm like, okay, right, let's look at this situation. We have people like Keffels, who at first I was sympathetic to, because, you know, they claim they'd been swatted. That's not great, right? They claim that they were being targeted and stalked in real life. Again, that goes way beyond the pale of freedom of speech. But then my problem lay when Keffels asked everyone to donate $100,000 to them so that they could sue Kiwi Farms for this stuff, and then they didn't sue Kiwi Farms, because that just proves that they never gave that much of a shit in the first place. Because if I was putting on the display Keffels was, and I was claiming that I'd been swatted, stalked, and harassed in real life, the first thing I would do when I got that money would be fucking hire a lawyer. But no, Keffels clearly didn't give enough of a shit about the moral stuff that they were talking about, or they would have fucking sued Kiwi Farms. Now, this is my fucking problem. The majority of the people who are doing this shit, it isn't about anything other than them just not wanting to be criticised, and that's something I have a problem with. And that is kind of why I left. Because it got to a point where it was like, okay, right, I've suffered people trying to make me kill myself, and the worst type of sexual PTSD, and everyone else around here is just mad because someone called them a tard. Like, it really pissed me off, because when you've sort of been dragged through the mud like I have, and then you're met with someone like Keffels or Liz Fong Jones, who is clearly hasn't had an ounce of the fucking experience that I have, in a bad way. They haven't suffered a fucking ounce of that shit. They don't have to deal with people threatening to rape them, or people threatening to like distribute porn of like non-consensual pornography, not porn that they made, but non-consensual pornography that they sent to one person of them. They didn't deal with that, right? And that's the thing that I have a big fucking issue with, is that the majority of the people who are morally crusading are just mad that they're being criticised. There isn't an actual reason for them to be mad. And anyway, yeah, that's my rant. That's my rant on the whole Drop Kiwi Farms thing. And it's really unhinged. And I'm very tired, so it's probably going to make no sense. And I'm probably going to cringe when I see this in the morning. But anyway.